Hey, I'm Matt Brownell.
And I'm Van Owens.
And I'm Tim Adams.
Welcome to Climbing the Mountain, where we dive into the scriptures and discuss themes, connections, and real-life application. We're kicking off a series here where we're going to examine the Sermon on the Mount and discuss implications for this teaching for Christians today. All right, we're back with part 2 of the Beatitudes. We are looking at the Sermon on the Mount and the heart of it. And last week we did a lot of intro to it, which was really fascinating to think about who was listening to this, some of the setup and Jesus's focus when preaching this sermon. Now we're going to get into the heart of this sermon, the Beatitudes. Jim, you want to read it? Do you want to read the section we're going to be covering now?
Sure.
In Matthew?
In Matthew chapter 5, it says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven."
Awesome. Thank you. Let's dive in now. So we talked last time about how Jesus is doing a new Moses kind of thing here, going up on a mountain, just like at Sinai, giving the people the law of the kingdom, right? Or the kingdom of heaven here. How do the Beatitudes mirror the Ten Commandments? And how do they differ from the Decalogue? What do we learn from these kind of comparisons?
Yeah, I'm curious what you guys think about this. To me, it was the part that felt pretty simple, was Jesus is doing a similar thing to Moses in that he's saying, hey, remember these things. Like if you forget anything else, like this is the crux of it. And that feels like a very key similarity. It's easy to remember the Ten Commandments. It's easy to remember the Beatitudes. It can be easy to forget, once you get into the long paragraphs. But like it's arranged in a list. It's arranged poetically, So I think that's helpful. But to me, the thing that feels different, right? Like the Ten Commandments are just that. They're commandments. They're do this, don't do this. And there's for some of them, there's some reasoning given. But with Jesus, he's talking about qualities, right? He's talking about who's up, who's down, right? He's like upending a way of seeing the world. And so that has in some ways, there's like very clear kind of practicals, if you will, coming out of the Beatitudes. But in other ways, the Beatitudes are just like the foundation for all of the practicals that are going to come out of the rest of the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah, I think that you're right about that, Tim. That the Ten Commandments sort of lay the foundation, but there's a lot more in the law that expands upon it and that builds upon it. And it's very similar here in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus builds upon these Beatitudes. I think that one of the ways that they are different, when you look back at the Ten Commandments, there is a very literally negative bend to the Ten Commandments.
Yeah,
most of them are don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and don't do this. And that is, and I'm not saying that it's negative in the sense of wanting to make us feel bad, but it's negative in the sense of it's not expressed positively. It doesn't say, be pure and be in a good relationship with your wife. It says don't covet somebody else's wife. And So, and I think the Beatitudes are sort of the opposite of that. They say, this is who you are to be. This is how you, this is it. There's not, in the Beatitudes, there's not, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. It's more, this is who you are to be. This is what's to come from the inside. It's almost like the commandments are like, this is how you act. And the Beatitudes are, this is who you are to be.
Yeah, I
that's
like
good.
that.
So I think a similarity is they both kind of start at the beginning of their ministries, and they both sort of outline how this thing they're doing is going to operate.
Right. Yep.
Right. Like Jesus is saying, hey, all these people you think are outside, we're bringing them inside. And Moses said, here are the rules we're going to have for this thing we're doing. So I think they're very good. They're both can be seen as like almost a pronouncement of how it's going to work going forward. I actually think there's a huge difference here, and this is a big one to me, is that when Moses gave the 10 Commandments, Israel had like left Egypt, but I don't know how much of a concept they had of God, who he was, what he thought. I mean, generations removed from their last people who really we have any record of walking with God. So they know they're different. They know they're Hebrews. They know they're that. I don't know what they knew about God. And so I have a hard time saying they actually had any concept of who God was and what he wanted from them and what he wanted to do with them. And so Moses is literally building a nation of people who know nothing of God into this thing that is going to honor God. And that's maybe why he starts with a negative bent of like, here's some things you ain't supposed to do.
Right.
Like, because you don't know, I'm helping you out.
Right.
Here's what not to do.
It's like your little kid, right? You can't explain to them, cars are dangerous, blah, blah, blah. You just say, don't go on the road.
No, I say, you hold my hand when we're in the parking lot. Why, Daddy? Because I said so,
Exactly.
bud. Because I said so.
Yeah, I think that what you said, Jim, makes me think that, who Moses was talking to. He's talking to people who are slaves.
Yeah.
They're ex-slaves. And that what a slave would hear mostly is, these are the limits on your personhood.
Yeah.
This is what you cannot do. And that maybe that's why the language is so negative, is because what they are used to hearing is negative. Now, again, he's going to expand it to be able to say, this is who you really are. But where he starts is where the people are. And they're in this mode where all my existence, I have been told what I need to do and told with the very harsh limits of what I get to do. And that if he were to take them out of the land of Egypt and start with, blessed are they wouldn't have had a frame of reference for that.
What do you mean?
They would say, what are you talking about? You got the wrong group. I think you meant the Egyptians when you said that. They're the ones who are blessed. We're slaves.
Van, now you make me want to do another one of these on that part of the Bible, which don't tempt me because I want to.
Do it.
Let's do it. Let's go. No, I also think it's important to recognize that I think Jesus was talking to his disciples, and we can. There's some things we can do on that, and we talked about that last pod. But this idea of following God and honoring God was not new to them.
Right.
They were trying to do that. They were doing everything they could to live out Torah in their lives. Obviously, we can critique the way they were doing it. I'm not a fan of that, but like, they were trying, whereas the 10 Commandments was like, this was entirely new to, like Van said, with the people who Moses was talking to. And Moses is going, yeah, this is what you can handle. I can handle giving you a list of things you ain't supposed to do, so don't do them. And then we'll work on the rest later.
It's kind of funny. Like I was thinking the last podcast we did, Jim, where you brought out that there are people here that from the Decapolis or whatever that probably would have no inkling of religious, background like the Pharisees, definitely, totally. I was thinking, this got me thinking also because we've been doing this backwards and we're ending with the Beatitudes. It got me thinking of the end and how people were astonished at his teaching. Mm-hmm. And so there is an element here, I think, where it is new, right? He is, I think the Hebrews writer talks about Jesus being a son over the house versus Moses, a servant in the house. And I think there is an element here of his authority. The way he's approaching would be new to someone who just had the Torah too. Like
absolutely.
Like he does this too. Like when he summarizes the greatest commandments, the Shema and Leviticus 19 about it's the same. It feels like the same kind of thing, like a summarization of all of, here's what it is. The main things, your relationship with God, your relationship with people.
Right.
And you kind of see that again with these two.
And you see it on you have heard it was said, but I say to you. I mean, that's a rabbinical way of saying, like, I'm bringing out something new
that's big
that you haven't heard before. And like, that's not a thing that every rabbi got to, like, had the right to do in their world.
Yeah.
So like I think there are definitely things that Jesus is bringing out that are new and that are expound on what the people already knew. I guess the point I was kind of going for was that with the Ten Commandments and Moses, they had no background in anything. They were as pagan as functionally they were as pagan could be. And now the people Jesus is talking to probably have Torah memorized. They probably have a fair portion of the text memorized.
Definitely some of the people in the audience would, yeah.
His followers probably do, and they are actively trying to live it out. Mm-hmm. They're already trying to engage in the work. Whereas in Moses, it was just like, here, now you're here. We're in the desert together. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
How's this going to work?
I think the other thing that I'm drawn to in comparing these two, well, first of all, I didn't like that there were 10 and then there was only 8. I'm like, come on, it should be the same number.
That might be an invitation though to look at some of the differences too. I think if it was supposed to be again, in a Jewish mindset, if it was supposed to be a perfect analog, there probably would have been 10. So that's probably an invitation to dig in and look at differences.
And I think we see, I think by doing that, you do see some structural differences. I think you mentioned it was poetic, Tim. I think that you're right. It's very tight. It begins and ends with this promise of the kingdom of yours is the kingdom of heaven. And in the first, there's like, for the first 4 and the second 4 seem like the first 4 to me seem like they're the blessedness of emptiness, right? Like you're seeing your need for God. So it's in relationship to God. And then the second 4 seem like, if you're filled up now, you're. Are
we doing the structure talk now?
You're going into, your relationship with others. And I think I see that also in the 10 Commandments. I see the first 5, especially the first 3 are related in your relationship to God. And then the next 2 are the only 2 that are positive, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're remember the Sabbath and honor your father and mother. And it relates to God in a sense as well as others. The Sabbath was definitely so you could worship God. It was a time where you don't have to do work and you can focus on God. But it's also like a blessing for everyone around you, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, so there's that knuckle, and
can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Do we want to do the structure talk now? Because I have a lot of thoughts on that, unsurprisingly. Because I know it's coming up later. So
I think we should dive into each of them, but I think it's okay to bring out like the general, like how do we see this, like
structure?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about. I don't know. We've still got some time. We could hit some of it now.
All right. So I think with the structure, Matt was mentioning kind of the structure of the Beatitudes and the Ten Commandments. One thing I think is interesting with the Beatitudes is what you said is, and this has always kind of bothered me, with kind of, we say, well, he goes from, internal to external, and then he goes right back to pure in heart and what should be the external section. Right? Like, that's supposed to be how we engage the world, not things that are internal to us. So that bothers me about the structure a little bit. And I think Matt or Tim mentioned that he goes kingdom of heaven, and because it seems like we kind of have a front half and a back half, to a Jewish reader, they would go, oh, we have these two bookends, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So there's probably something in there that would be a chiasm, that which means they're trying to get us into the middle of that, and we'll kind of pick that up a little bit. But that's where they're trying to get to focus. But it's always bothered me because I always said, oh yeah, Jesus goes who you are internally, and then he goes, hunger and thirst for righteousness. Okay, that's kind of internal. Okay, merciful. I can't internally be merciful. Mercy doesn't work if it's not active. But then he goes right back to blessed are the pure in heart. And that's very much internal.
But it also can be, I think it can be both.
It can be, but it doesn't necessitate.
Both is all of these things, I think.
There is a both to it, but but then we come to the problem of we're saying how we are internally, and then it's how we engage with people, right? Let me
rephrase that then. If I thought of the first four as seeing your need, right, and I think you're right about the chiasm that it's like. Okay, it's
we can get to the point of that later.
The knuckle between 4 and 5, where you hunger and thirst for righteousness, and then you'll be filled. I think there's a sense of because it reminds me of Romans 12 about how in view of God's mercy, then we offer ourselves as living sacrifices, and I think that. There's something about that here too. Like you see your need, you are filled, and then because you've received mercy, you show mercy because you have this, and we'll talk about it, all of these kind of things. I think we'll drill into them. But the purity that your vision, your unadulterated vision of God, now you're able to view other people differently and see the world differently.
Sure, and that's part of it. I just think I always have had a hard time because I've heard these gone as, the first four are internal, and then it's external. It's this engagement that's necessary with the second four, and I'm like, well, pure in heart doesn't necessitate. That's a hard word to say.
It is a hard word.
It doesn't necessarily necessitate engagement with other people. It can be a very internal. It is a very internal thing. So I've always been bothered by that sort of, and I've used that explanation. I've had that, and I think recently I've become a lot more bothered by if that is, and
maybe it's maybe another way of thinking of it is a regenerated life, right? Like a restore, like you're now you've got new life, right?
Yeah. I also think this is a good time to point out we don't have to explain problems away. I see a problem there. I don't need to explain it away. We can actually let the problem sit, because the problems, again, if this is to a Jewish audience, problems are where you find the good stuff to them. And so I'm still wrestling with why it's set up this way. Like, why did Matthew choose to set the Beatitudes up in this way? I have some theories. We'll get to those in a few minutes, but I think sorry to go on the structure tangent.
No, this is great. And I think this is where we get, in the discussion here, we wrestle with some of these things. That's more interesting stuff.
Yeah. So I think I don't have an answer, and I don't need to have an answer. I'm just kind of saying this is this feels odd to me.
We don't need to have an answer, but it's also highlighting I should investigate this. Not just I don't have an answer and I can just move on.
Yeah.
No, it should bother you in a good way.
I think a good way to handle this is to go, if we're saying the engage the world versus, or the internal versus engaging people, it doesn't quite seem to fit, and there's probably something there. That's kind of where I tend to, that's where I'm at today. I reserve the right to change that in the future.
Yeah.
Sorry for the tangent.
No. Don't apologize. It helped me to think about this because I've been reading another book by G.K. Beale about New Testament theology and looking at tracing through major themes in the Bible. And one of them is this concept of creation, bringing order out of chaos. And that's what we see in Genesis, and then where we partner with God in the first Great Commission of Genesis 1, be fruitful and multiply, subdue the earth. This is a partnership of bringing order out of chaos, and so there is a new life that we're invited into in Jesus. Suddenly we've got. Boy, we are going on a tangent here.
Yeah. I wanted to take a step back.
Yeah.
But you want to finish?
I'll just finish just saying, this is, I see that here too in a way that we're broken in a sense. Like if we are honest, we have a deep need for God. We were created to be image bearers. And when we actually see what our greatest desire is, if it's not God, and we can be honest with that, uncomfortable as it is, well, then we have a chance of being filled with God and being an image bearer and then going out into the world and being as we were created to be.
Bring us back in.
I just want to give a little bit of context because it's funny for some. So if someone's listening to this, right? And they're like,
wait, someone's listening to this?
And they're like, okay,
they're lost now. Sorry, everyone. My fault.
Yeah, but they're like, why is Jim getting so excited about structure, right? Like, there's a legitimate question there, right?
I'm a nerd.
And yeah, but I don't think it's just that you're a nerd. When we look at, what are we trying to do with this whole podcast? We're trying to understand what Jesus is talking about, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount it's exposition, right? And there's a lot to draw out, which is why we're 60 episodes in on this thing. But with the Beatitudes, they scream at you. There is more to these words than what just the words are.
Yeah.
These are things to sit with. I'm going to sit with, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, for a long time.
Right.
And it also is very clear, okay, if I just look at one of these in isolation, I'm going to miss something.
Yeah.
These are meant to be seen as a unit that are bringing us towards a fuller understanding of, I think, because of the bookends, on the kingdom of heaven, right?
Yeah.
So we're getting super excited, oh man, what does it mean? What's the structure? Because we're we think there's treasure there, right?
And it would make in everything you said, it makes so much sense because this is how the Jewish people at that time consumed. They did bookends, they left breadcrumbs, they left little hints. It wasn't it wasn't again, to use the neon sign analogy, ding, 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 here it is. And they also didn't consume the text the way we do. We consume the text in proof texts, in little snippets of things with no context. They don't consume it that way. They look through the whole thing and try to find the themes in the whole thing, not just the themes that seem to be there when we clip them out of context. So I think, Tim, you make a great point that we get excited because there really looks like there's something there, and everything we know about how the people hearing this thought, there probably is something there, and we want to figure out what that is.
And even just from a good teacher standpoint, right? Jesus is not trying to just give information to people, to his disciples. Jesus is trying to train his disciples to follow him.
Yeah.
and doing a very different thing. And so Jesus is looking for behavior change and heart change in these people. And you don't get that from giving people information.
No.
I'm in the middle of my job right now. I'm
That's a great
trying to figure out how to get a bunch of engineers who have spent their whole life just looking at kind of stuff from the historical past to build infrastructure. And my job is to get them to start thinking a little bit more about the future. And maybe there's some changes coming in the future because of the climate, right? And I can't do that by just giving them numbers. Like if that's all I do, it's going to be a total failure. And I'm wrestling with that. But Jesus he has given us something that is designed to get our gears going.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's really helpful, because it's sometimes easy for me to get lost in the weeds, right, on any particular thing. But like the point of this is I'm trying to sit with this powerful framework, powerful poetry that Jesus gave me to align my heart and my mind and my life closer to his.
I love that. I think that's something that is, I think maybe I'm going to speak for all of us. We tend to probably be more on the logical, let me make my statement. And this is, if it's logical, people will listen and they'll just see, oh, it must be this. But that's not how people work. Like, I wish more people were like, okay, facts, good, do it. Let's do it. But that's not how we do it. we have, and I think that what Jesus is doing, he recognizes that the best appeal is not going to be one to just pure logic, but like your heart. And I think that notion, that word for heart in this context would encompass the mind, but also your seat of feelings, who you are in the core. And so I love that you use the word poetry, because it's what it is. He's speaking to your heart. That's gonna change you much more than hear your facts.
We should probably end this one.
I know.
I think we're right at time.
I think
we got to end it here. I wish we could keep going. We'll have to come back to more. There's more structural stuff to look at here. But this has been fun. Thanks, guys.
Good stuff, boys.